My stepmother color-coded our lives and wrote a book about our perfect blended family, while all 6 kids secretly ran a Discord server called Surviving Susan. When I refused to let her use my dead mom's mixing bowl for her cookbook photo shoot, she tried to have me sent to a therapeutic boarding school. My stepmother Susan thought she'd created the perfect blended family, but we 6 kids had other plans. Growing up, I thought everyone's house had a color-coded calendar on the fridge. Monday was blue for Jake's activities. Tuesday was green for Mia's dance. Wednesday was purple for Ethan's tutoring. Thursday was red for Emma's violin. Friday was yellow for my soccer. Saturday was orange for Noah's art class. Sundays we all had family time together. 8 people around a table meant for 6. Susan would smile at her beautiful bunch while passing the salad bowl. I was 9 when mom died. Those 2 years with just dad, Emma, and Noah felt quiet but real. Then dad met Susan at grief counseling, and suddenly our house exploded with strangers. She moved in with her 3 kids, Jake, who was my age, Mia, who was 13, and little Ethan, who was 7. 6 kids crammed into a 4-bedroom house. 23 photo frames on the mantle where 3 used to be. By the time I was 12, I'd started noticing the silence between us kids. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things. Emma would suddenly need to use the bathroom whenever Mia entered the kitchen. Jake's smile would freeze when I spoke. During Sunday dinners, we coordinated like a military operation. Never sitting adjacent, never reaching for the same dish, never making direct eye contact. Susan would joke about having the most organized children in the world. We'd all laugh, but it sounded like breaking glass. By the time I turned 13, I'd mapped out the invisible war zones in our house. The basement rec room, where Jake accidentally deleted my saved games every week. The kitchen island, where Mia planted her homework exactly where Emma liked to eat breakfast. The bathroom cabinet, where someone kept moving someone else's stuff to the guest bath. I thought we were just adjusting. Susan called it beautiful chaos. The real education came from my sister Emma. She started pointing things out. Notice how Jake's suddenly allergic to our laundry detergent? Or, why does Mia get migraines every time we want to watch our mom's favorite movie? The 6 of us had created an elaborate system of avoiding each other while maintaining Susan's fantasy of harmony. At Susan's 40th birthday party, she insisted we all contribute to the celebration. The kitchen became a battlefield disguised as birthday prep. Emma used the last of the vanilla extract that Mia needed. Jake hid the good mixer when he saw me looking for it. Noah, accidentally, knocked over Ethan's decorating supplies. By evening, we had 6 separate desserts, each more passive-aggressively presented than the last. Susan thought it was wonderful. My babies all wanted to make me something special. The breaking point happened when I was 15. I needed to print an essay and borrowed Mia's laptop. That's when I saw the Discord server, Surviving Susan. All 6 kids were members, even little Ethan. The messages went back 3 years. Jake had started it after Susan's first family bonding camping trip, where she made us share tents. The chat was brutal. Bathroom schedules updated in real time. Warnings about Susan's moods, countdown timers to the ends of forced family activities. The channel that made my hands shake was called Exit Strategies. Jake was counting days until college. Mia had mapped out which relatives would take her for summers. Emma was researching early graduation. Noah had boarding school brochures hidden under his bed. Even Ethan, only 10 years old, had asked about sleepaway camps. But the worst channel was Things We Can't Say. Emma had posted about hearing Susan humming in our mom's kitchen and wanting to scream. Noah admitted he sometimes forgot mom's voice and hated Susan's laugh for filling the silence. Jake had written at 2 a.m. I know it's not your fault your mom died, but I hate you all for existing in my house. That night at dinner, I watched us perform our usual symphony of false smiles and calculated kindness. Susan told her favorite story about how blessed she was, how other moms at book club envied her harmonious household. Emma gripped her fork so tight her knuckles went white. Jake stared at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Mia's eye twitched every time Susan said, family. Noah was sketching escape routes on his napkin. Ethan had already perfected the 1,000-yard stare. I realized then that Susan had built her dream life on the backs of 6 kids who'd given up their authentic selves to maintain her delusion. She genuinely believed we were siblings who'd chosen this bond. She had no idea she was the only thing keeping 6 traumatized children trapped in the same house, performing happiness while we counted days like prisoners. Susan announced she was writing a book about our journey. She wanted to help other blended families achieve what we had. 2 weeks later, during her family cooking day for the book's photo shoot, she reached for mom's vintage mixing bowl, the one with the tiny chip from when I was 5, the one mom used for Christmas cookies. She handed it to Ethan, telling him to smile for the new family traditions chapter. The words ripped out of me before I could stop them. That's not yours. Everyone froze. Susan's smile flickered. Susan's photographer captured the moment perfectly. My face contorted with rage, her smile frozen in confusion. Ethan clutching the bowl like a lifeline. The camera clicked again as I stood there, realizing what had just escaped my mouth. Susan's smile hardened into something I'd never seen before, something that made my stomach drop. Her voice dropped to a dangerous quiet that made all 6 kids hold their breath. Ethan's knuckles went white around the ceramic bowl. Dad appeared in the doorway, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. I couldn't stop myself. The words tumbled out louder, clearer. I pointed at the bowl in Ethan's hands. My voice shook, but I kept going, explaining how mom had used it every Christmas, how she'd let me lick the cookie dough from its sides when I was little. Susan's voice trembled as she responded, insisting we were all family now, that these were our traditions to share. The photographer kept clicking away, capturing every second of the unraveling. Emma stepped forward and placed her hand on my shoulder. Her whispered warning to stop came with a supportive squeeze that told me she understood. Across the kitchen, Jake pulled out his phone, his thumbs moving rapidly while his face remained completely blank. Susan's eyes darted to his screen, then back to me. Susan's hands shook as she dismissed the photographer with brittle cheerfulness. She insisted this was just a family moment, that they could reschedule the shoot another day. The photographer packed up quickly, sensing the tension that crackled through the kitchen like electricity. Dad entered fully, demanding an explanation for the disruption. I caught Mia raising her phone slightly, her finger tapping the screen. Later, I'd learned she'd screenshotted Susan's expression of pure rage before the mask of concern slipped back into place. Susan spun the story expertly. She spoke of hormones and grief, of totally normal resistance to change in blended families. Her voice dripped with false understanding as I tried to protest, to explain about the bowl, about everything. The other kids stayed silent, their faces carefully neutral as they'd learned to be. Dad suggested I take a walk to cool down. His voice held that particular tone of forced calm that meant he didn't want to deal with conflict. As I headed for the door, I saw Susan pull out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I recognized her damage control mode, the same frantic texting she did whenever one of her book club stories didn't land quite right. In the garage, Noah found me slumped against Dad's workbench. He showed me his phone screen without a word. The Discord server was exploding. "It's happening" filled the screen, messages from all 5 siblings flooding in faster than I could read. Jake had posted a play-by-play of the kitchen confrontation. Mia had uploaded the screenshot of Susan's rage face. Even little Ethan had typed "finally" in all caps. Emma appeared minutes later, closing the garage door behind her carefully. She pulled out her phone and showed me a folder I'd never seen before. Years of comparison photos filled the screen. Susan's Facebook posts versus reality. The Thanksgiving where she claimed we'd all cooked together, but the timestamp showed us kids in separate rooms. The spontaneous family game night that had required 3 hours of threats to stage. And there, at the bottom, a video from Susan's birthday party showing all 6 kids' faces as she gushed about our perfect harmony. We looked like hostages. Through the garage window, I watched Susan gather Jake, Mia, and Ethan in the living room. Emma and Noah pressed against the glass beside me. Susan's gestures grew animated as she spoke to her bio kids, occasionally pointing toward the garage. An emergency family meeting, but only for her real family. The next morning, breakfast became a minefield. Susan announced family therapy appointments to help process grief and adjustment issues. But as she listed the appointment times, I realized she'd only booked one slot for me, solo therapy, to deal with my obvious struggles. Emma's spoon clattered against her bowl. Noah's drawing hand stilled. Jake kept his eyes on his phone, but I saw his jaw clench. At school, the counselor pulled me aside before first period. Mrs. Peterson's face wore that careful expression adults used when they thought you might explode. Susan had called, expressing concerns about violent outbursts at home. The word unstable floated between us like a toxic cloud. I sat there stunned, as Mrs. Peterson asked if I felt safe at home, if I ever had thoughts of hurting myself or others. Jake cornered me by my locker at lunch. His usual cold distance had cracked slightly. 6 kids with a color-coded calendar and family time in air quotes. Susan's running this house like a corporate merger where nobody actually wanted to merge. He told me Susan was freaking out because the photographer had posted the kitchen confrontation on Instagram before she could stop him. Already, comments were rolling in asking if everything was okay, if this was part of the book project. Susan's carefully curated image was developing hairline fractures. After school, I stood with Emma and Noah at the pickup circle, watching Susan's car pull up. She waved cheerfully at other parents as Jake, Mia, and Ethan climbed in. She looked right through us, pulling away without a second glance. We started the long walk home in the winter rain, Emma's violin case banging against her leg with each step. Mrs. Chen from next door stopped me as we trudged up our driveway. She mentioned that Susan had asked her to keep an eye out for any concerning behavior from me. Her voice held a particular emphasis on the word concerning, and she glanced meaningfully at where Noah and Emma stood shivering. Susan had implied I might be a danger to the younger kids. Mrs. Chen patted my shoulder and said she'd told Susan that seemed unlikely, but I should know what was being said. That evening, I discovered Susan had changed the Netflix password. My profile had vanished entirely. Years of viewing history erased like I'd never existed. It was a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something larger. Digital erasure, one platform at a time. Emma found me staring at the login screen. She sat beside me and pulled up her email, showing me a draft Susan had sent herself, probably accidentally CC'd to Emma's account since they shared a family calendar. The subject line read, Chapter 12, When Love Isn't Enough, Dealing with Troubled Stepchildren. My name appeared 17 times in the first paragraph alone. I was becoming the villain of Susan's story, the problem child who threatened her perfect blended family. Dinner that night was a new level of psychological warfare. Susan served everyone except me, claiming she'd miscalculated portions and hadn't made enough. Dad said nothing, just pushed his own plate slightly in my direction. I pushed it back. Under the table, Mia slid a granola bar across to me, her face never changing as Susan launched into a speech about boundaries and respect in family units. Later, Ethan knocked on my door. He stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, looking smaller than his 10 years. He told me he didn't want the bowl, that his mom was being weird about everything. He said she'd spent an hour on the phone with someone, using words like documentation and patterns of behavior. It was the first crack in Susan's kids' loyalty I'd seen outside the Discord server. Susan's social media became a weapon. She posted a family photo from last month, but I'd been cropped out. The caption read, Protecting my babies from negative energy. Sometimes love means making hard choices. Blessed mama, safe spaces, family first. Within an hour, she had 47 concerned comments from book club friends and PTA moms asking if everything was all right. Dad finally asked what was really going on during our Thursday drive to soccer practice. For the first time in years, we were alone without Susan's orchestration. I showed him the Discord server on my phone, not the messages, just that it existed. His face went through several expressions before settling on something I couldn't read. He asked how long we'd all been pretending. I told him since the beginning. That night, Jake slipped a note under the bathroom door while I brushed my teeth. His handwriting was cramped and urgent. She's looking for boarding schools and therapeutic programs. Heard her on the phone with someplace in Utah. Watch your back. The note was signed with just a J, the first time he'd ever communicated with me directly outside of Discord. The escalation had begun. Susan was systematically building a case that I was the problem, the disruptor of her perfect narrative. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. And now all 6 kids were finally ready to push back. Susan scheduled my therapy appointment during Emma's violin recital. The timing wasn't accidental. She presented it as concern for my well-being, but I recognized the calculated cruelty. Emma had been preparing for this recital for months. Now I'd have to choose between supporting my sister and attending mandatory therapy with Susan's friend, Dr. Vicky Thompson. I chose Emma. Susan's face tightened when I announced my decision at breakfast. She made several phone calls while I ate my cereal, each conversation louder than the last. By the time I left for school, she'd rescheduled the appointment 3 times, each slot conflicting with something important to me or my siblings. At therapy, Dr. Thompson's questions felt like traps. She asked about my anger toward my mother for dying, whether I resented my father for moving on, if I felt replaced by Susan's children. Every question twisted normal grief into something pathological. I kept my answers short and factual. Dr. Thompson's pen scratched across her notepad with increasing frustration. Noah showed me his sketchbook that evening. He'd been documenting everything for 3 years. Page after page of detailed drawings showed our divided family, dinner scenes with invisible walls between us, birthday parties where smiles looked like grimaces. One sketch showed all 6 kids as marionettes with Susan holding the strings. The visual evidence of our misery was overwhelming. Ethan started refusing to participate in Susan's narrative about my instability. He'd witnessed her practicing concerned expressions in the bathroom mirror, rehearsing phrases about teenage volatility and grief-induced aggression. When she tried to get him to confirm I'd been acting strangely, he shrugged and walked away. Jake noticed his little brother's rebellion and seemed unsettled by it. I spent hours printing Discord conversations, creating a paper trail of our collective unhappiness. The printer ran out of ink twice. I hid copies in 3 different locations, one in the garage rafters, one in the hollow base of Mom's old jewelry box, and one in a plastic bag buried in the backyard. Evidence of 6 kids' desperation, dated and documented. The school suggested family mediation, after Mrs. Peterson's report noted inconsistencies inconsistencies in our family dynamic. Susan insisted I needed individual help instead. That group therapy would enable my manipulation of the younger children. She scheduled another solo appointment with Dr. Thompson, this time during Noah's art show. The pattern was becoming obvious to everyone except Dad. Emma started an anonymous blog about toxic positivity and blended families. She only shared the link with 3 trusted friends, but within days, the comment section exploded with similar stories. Parents forcing instant bonds, kids performing happiness, the exhaustion of maintaining false narratives. Emma's post about grieving mothers being erased by step-family demands got over 200 shares. I followed Susan to her coffee meeting with her book club friends. From a corner booth, I watched her performance. She dabbed at her eyes while describing my violent outburst, how she feared for her children's safety, how heartbreaking it was to watch me spiral. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone. Her friends cooed sympathetically, offering suggestions for therapeutic boarding schools and wilderness programs. Dad's mother called that evening. Susan had reached out to express concerns about my behavior, suggesting it might be best to limit my visits for everyone's safety. Grandma's voice was confused and worried. She'd never seen any concerning behavior from me. I explained what was happening, and her silence spoke volumes. She promised to call Dad directly. Susan's provocations intensified. She'd make subtle comments about my mother's death, leave brochures for grief camps on my pillow, scheduled check-ins about my mental state during homework time. I responded by calmly documenting everything. I kept a notebook where I recorded dates, times, and exact quotes. When Susan realized I was writing during her lectures, her composure cracked. She demanded to see the notebook. I told her I was journaling my feelings, as Dr. Thompson suggested. The lie tasted sweet. The family reunion was 3 weeks away. Susan announced I could only attend if I showed significant progress in therapy and apologized publicly for the mixing bowl incident. The deadline created urgency. My cousins would be there, people who'd known me since birth, who remembered Mom. Susan couldn't risk them seeing through her narrative. Mia found me alone in the kitchen one evening. She glanced around nervously before speaking. Her confession came in a rush. Susan had done this before. In her first marriage, she'd painted Mia's father as unstable when he questioned her parenting. She'd convinced everyone he was the problem until he'd finally left, exhausted from fighting her version of reality. Mia had watched her mother play victim while destroying her father's reputation. The pattern was repeating. Susan's mask slipped during book club at our house. Someone asked about the Instagram photo from the cookbook incident. Susan's carefully modulated voice cracked as she called me an ungrateful brat who couldn't accept love. The room went silent. Several women exchanged glances. Susan tried to recover, but the damage was done. Her perfect stepmother image had shown its first public crack. 2 days later, Susan cornered me in the laundry room. She made her offer clear: apologize publicly for the mixing bowl incident, support her book project, attend therapy without resistance, or she'd recommend residential treatment to Dad. She had brochures from 3 different programs, all specializing in troubled teens with attachment disorders. Her smile was triumphant as she laid out the ultimatum. Emma's car became our war room. All 6 kids crammed inside after Susan left for her Thursday night yoga class. Susan's playing chess while everyone else thought they were having family dinner, documenting patterns of behavior, like she's building a legal case instead of raising kids. The vote was unanimous. We were done pretending. Jake revealed something crucial. Susan's book advance was already partially spent. She'd used it for the kitchen renovation and new furniture. Without our cooperation for the book's completion, she'd have to pay it back. The financial pressure explained her increasing desperation. We developed a simple strategy. No more covering for each other's absences from Susan's activities. No more fake smiles during photo shoots. No more performed harmony at family dinners. We wouldn't be openly hostile. That would feed her narrative. Instead, we'd simply stop pretending to be the family she insisted we were. The shift was subtle but immediate. At dinner, we sat where we wanted instead of Susan's assigned seats. Jake sat next to me. Mia chose the spot beside Emma. Ethan squeezed between Noah and me. Susan's eyes darted around the table trying to understand the change. When she suggested we were sitting wrong, all 6 kids shrugged in unison. Dad noticed the new dynamic immediately. His confusion was evident as he watched his 3 biological children voluntarily interacting with Susan's kids. Real conversations replaced scripted pleasantries. Noah showed Ethan his sketches. Emma helped Mia with algebra. Jake and I discussed a video game we both played. Susan's smile became increasingly strained. The community began choosing sides. 3 neighbors approached Dad with concerns. Not about me, but about Susan's increasingly erratic behavior. Mrs. Chen mentioned the strange phone calls asking her to monitor me. Another neighbor reported Susan's attempts to recruit her as a character witness for my supposed instability. The third had overheard Susan screaming at me through the fence when she thought no one was around. Susan's publisher requested a family interview for the book's promotional materials. The email sent Susan into a panic. She knew we wouldn't maintain the charade for a professional interviewer. She tried to postpone, claiming scheduling conflicts, but the publisher insisted. The book's entire marketing strategy depended on our beautiful blended family story. Ethan's teacher called for a parent conference. During sharing time, he told his class about the 2 families living in one house, the real kids and the stepkids who had to pretend to be siblings. He'd drawn a picture of 2 separate dinner tables pushed together. The teacher was concerned about the family dynamics. Susan tried to dismiss it as childhood imagination, but the teacher had kept the drawing. I took responsibility for confusing Ethan, telling the teacher I'd been struggling with the adjustment and might have expressed frustration inappropriately. The lie protected Ethan from Susan's wrath while reinforcing my supposed instability. Susan's relief was palpable, but Ethan's grateful smile told me he understood the sacrifice. Our subtle rebellion escalated. We started wearing clashing colors for Susan's staged family photos. We mixed up our positions. Bio kids and step kids intermingled instead of grouped. We smiled, but naturally instead of posed. Susan's photographer friend commented that we looked more relaxed. Susan's jaw clenched at the observation. Susan's attempts to separate us failed spectacularly. When she tried to take only her bio kids shopping, Jake refused to go without me. When she planned a special dinner for just her children, Mia invited Emma and Noah to join. Ethan started calling us his real siblings in front of Susan. Each defection hit her like a physical blow. The explosion came on a Tuesday evening. Dad had left for a hardware store run. Susan cornered me in the kitchen, screaming about how I'd poisoned her children against her, how I destroyed her family, how everything had been perfect until I'd opened my ungrateful mouth. Her voice rose to a shriek. She didn't notice Dad had returned, standing frozen in the doorway with his car keys still in his hand. The silence after Susan realized Dad was there stretched endlessly. She tried to recover, to spin the situation, but Dad had finally seen the truth. His face showed a mixture of shock, guilt, and dawning understanding. He asked Susan to explain what she meant by everything had been perfect. Her stammering response only damned her further. Mrs. Chen organized an informal neighborhood book club meeting. The topic of discussion was Susan's behavior. 6 different women shared concerning observations. The mom from down the street mentioned Susan asking probing questions about my mental health. Another recalled called Susan's attempts to gather negative stories about me. The consensus was clear. Susan was the problem, not me. The school counselor's report became our strongest evidence. 6 different interviews with 6 different kids had yielded one consistent theme. We were miserable. The counselor noted the unusual family dynamics, the clear division between biological and step siblings, and the pressure to perform happiness. She recommended family therapy with a neutral therapist, not Dr. Thompson. Susan's publisher deadline loomed. 2 weeks to submit the final chapter of her perfect blended family guide. Her laptop stayed open on the kitchen counter, the cursor blinking on a blank page. She'd type frantically, then delete everything. The story she'd planned to tell was crumbling, and she couldn't figure out how to spin our reality into her fantasy. Parent pickup became a daily humiliation for Susan. Other parents had heard about her meltdown in the parking lot, witnessed her hissing threats at me when she thought no one was watching. They kept their distance, their children suddenly too busy for playdates with Ethan. Susan's social circle was contracting just as her professional dreams imploded. I maintained grace under pressure, culling Susan's narrative with kindness. When she provoked, I responded calmly. When she accused, I documented quietly. When she threatened, I smiled sadly and walked away. My refusal to play villain frustrated her into increasingly desperate acts. Dad watched it all with growing concern. The confrontation about the book was inevitable. Dad told Susan the project needed to stop, that our family needed to focus on healing without public scrutiny. Susan's response was vicious. She accused him of choosing them over her, of letting his bio kids manipulate him, of being too weak to support her dreams. The argument echoed through the house as all 6 kids huddled in Emma's room. We presented our evidence to Dad the next morning. Timeline of incidents, printed Discord conversations, Emma's documentation photos, Noah's sketches, recorded conversations, witness statements from neighbors. The truth was undeniable and overwhelming. 6 kids united in their misery, forced to perform happiness for a woman who saw them as props in her personal narrative. Susan agreed to postpone the book indefinitely. She framed it as focusing on family healing, but we all knew the truth. Without our cooperation, she had no story to sell. The publisher wasn't interested in another broken blended family. They wanted the fairy tale Susan had promised, the one that had never existed outside her imagination. Her pivot to blogging lasted exactly 1 day. She posted about the challenges of raising troubled stepchildren, how love wasn't always enough, how some wounds were too deep to heal quickly. Within hours, all 6 kids had commented with corrections, clarifications, and contradictory evidence. Susan deleted the post, but screenshots were already circulating among our classmates' parents. The false peace was more unsettling than the war. Susan scheduled separate activities for bio versus stepkids, accidentally admitting what we'd known all along. We were 2 families forced to share space, not one united unit. Her attempts at damage control only highlighted the divide she'd spent years denying. Through the battles, something unexpected had happened. The 6 kids who'd spent years avoiding each other had become actual allies. Jake helped me with homework. I taught Ethan guitar chords. Emma and Mia shared clothes. Noah drew portraits of all of us together, not posed, but laughing genuinely. We'd found siblinghood in surviving Susan's fantasy. Mia received an email from her father. She'd been updating him secretly for months, sharing her fears about her mother's escalating behavior. He'd respected her boundaries but remained concerned. Now he offered escape, a room in his apartment, a different school, distance from Susan's toxicity. Mia printed the email and stared at it for hours. Family therapy with a neutral therapist brought breakthrough and breakdown simultaneously. When asked to share honestly, we 6 kids presented a united front. We didn't want to pretend anymore. We were tired of performing. We wanted authenticity, even if it meant admitting we weren't the blended family Susan had tried to force us to become. The therapist's validation of our feelings sent Susan into a visible spiral. Susan's confession came through tears and rage. She'd wanted to prove she could succeed where her first marriage had failed. She'd needed us to be perfect to validate her choices, to prove she was a good mother, to show the world she could blend a family through sheer force of will. Her desperation had driven every manipulation, every lie, every forced moment of fake harmony. Jake's admission followed. He'd been miserable since day 1 but felt trapped by his mother's needs. He'd watched her destroy his father and feared abandoning her would trigger another breakdown, but he couldn't pretend anymore. He was exhausted from performing happiness, from maintaining her delusion, from sacrificing his own truth for her narrative. The evidence was undeniable. Years of messages, photos, videos, documentation from multiple sources. The Discord server alone contained thousands of messages detailing our collective misery. Susan's fantasy was officially dead, called by the very children she'd claimed to unite. Jake just casually drops that mom spent the book money on kitchen cabinets like he's mentioning the weather. Honestly, that timing deserves an award for maximum impact. The truth was messier but real. We were 6 damaged kids who'd found connection in shared survival. Dad's apology came brokenly. He'd been so lost in his own grief that he'd let Susan's fantasy blind him to our suffering. He'd wanted to believe her vision because it meant he hadn't failed us by bringing chaos into our lives. His tears were the first authentic emotion we'd seen from an adult in years. Susan's final manipulation was her cruelest. She threatened to leave and take her bio kids, forcing Dad to choose between his children and hers. The ultimatum backfired spectacularly. Jake, Mia, and Ethan refused to leave. They'd found real family in the battle against their mother's delusions. Susan's own children choosing us over her was the ultimate reversal. Jake's confession broke something fundamental in Susan. Her face crumpled as her oldest child explained his years of misery, his exhaustion from maintaining her delusions. She turned to Mia, then Ethan, searching for loyalty that no longer existed. When even 10-year-old Ethan stepped closer to me instead of her, Susan's carefully constructed world shattered completely. The documentation from the Discord server painted an undeniable picture. Years of coordinated avoidance, shared misery, and desperate escape plans. The therapist reviewed printouts while Susan sat rigid in her chair. Each page revealed another layer of our collective performance, another crack in her perfect family narrative. Dad's face grew paler with every revelation. Susan's attempts to salvage control grew increasingly frantic. She scheduled individual meetings with each of her bio kids, trying to convince them they were being manipulated. Jake recorded his session on his phone. Mia took detailed notes. Ethan simply walked out halfway through. Their unified rejection of her narrative left Susan scrambling for new tactics. The financial reality hit hard. Susan's publisher demanded either the completed manuscript or return of the advance. The money had already been spent on kitchen renovations and furniture meant to stage the perfect family home. Without our cooperation, she had no book to deliver. The deadline passed with Susan staring at blank pages, her laptop cursor blinking accusingly. Dad initiated separation proceedings. Not divorce yet, but a necessary space for everyone to breathe. Susan's reaction was volcanic. She alternated between tearful pleas and vicious accusations. She blamed me for poisoning her children, Dad for weakness, the therapist for bias. Everyone was at fault except her. Moving day arrived with all 8 family members present. Susan packed while we watched, her movements sharp and angry. She tried one last manipulation, telling her kids they had to choose, her or this broken family. Jake helped me carry boxes to her car. Mia organized the kitchen items with Emma. Ethan sat on the porch steps between Noah and me, his small hand gripping mine. The mixing bowl became a final battleground. Susan reached for it, claiming it as hers since she'd been using it. I could have fought, could have made a scene. Instead, I wrapped it carefully in newspaper and handed it to her. She needed it more than I did. My memories of mom didn't live in ceramic. Susan's exit should have felt like victory, but it felt hollow. 6 kids stood in the driveway watching her drive away, her children still with us by their own choice. The house felt different immediately. Not better exactly, but real. No more performed meals, no more staged photos, no more pretending to be something we weren't. Jake claimed the basement room Susan had forbidden him from using. His first act was deleting the surviving Susan server and creating a new one. Just us. The messages shifted from survival strategies to genuine communication. Movie preferences, homework help, shared memes, normal sibling stuff we'd never been allowed before. Mia decided to stay despite her father's offer. She set up a video call schedule with him, but chose to remain with the family she'd found in battle. Her relationship with Emma evolved from careful avoidance to genuine friendship. They painted each other's nails and shared clothes without Susan's forced sisterhood narrative hanging over them. Ethan's adjustment was hardest. At 10, he'd spent most of his life performing happiness. Real emotions confused him. He'd start to smile for photos, then remember he didn't have to pose anymore. Noah worked with him on art projects, teaching him to express feelings through drawing instead of suppression. Dad struggled with guilt and relief in equal measure. He'd failed to see our misery, but he was trying now. Family dinners became optional. Sometimes all 6 kids showed up, sometimes just 2 or 3. The freedom to choose made all the difference. We ate leftovers on mismatched plates and nobody documented it for social media. Susan's attempts to maintain control from a distance failed spectacularly. She created a blog about parental alienation, claiming I'd turned her children against her. Jake, Mia, and Ethan responded with their own posts detailing years of manipulation. The blog disappeared within a week. School noticed the changes immediately. 6 kids who'd previously maintained careful distances now sat together at lunch. We helped each other with homework. We showed up to each other's events because we wanted to, not because Susan scheduled it. Teachers commented on how much happier we seemed. The house reorganized itself naturally. Emma's violin practice no longer had to be scheduled around Mia's dance. Jake's gaming didn't have to accommodate my soccer schedule. We worked around each other organically, the way real families do. The color-coded calendar came down, replaced by a simple whiteboard where we wrote notes to each other. Ethan started calling me his brother without prompting. Not stepbrother, not Susan's careful bonus sibling terminology, just brother. The first time he said it, I had to leave the room. Emma found me in the garage, not crying exactly, but something close. She understood without words. Dad learned to cook beyond basic survival meals. We took turns helping, teaching each other recipes we remembered or finding new ones online. Jake turned out to be surprisingly good at stir-fry. Mia made incredible brownies. We ate our successes and failures together. No photography required. Susan's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. Without the book advance, she couldn't afford the apartment she'd envisioned. She moved in with her mother, who'd always enabled her fantasies. Her social media shifted from perfect family posts to vague inspirational quotes about resilience and starting over. The first holiday without Susan felt strange. Dad asked what we wanted to do for Thanksgiving. The unanimous answer surprised him. Nothing fancy. We made sandwiches and played board games. No matching outfits, no forced gratitude circle, no staged photos, just 6 kids and a dad figuring out how to be a real family. Emma's college applications included essays about authentic relationships versus performed ones. She got into her first choice with a scholarship. The admissions committee mentioned her essay's raw honesty as a deciding factor. Susan tried to take credit on Facebook. All 6 kids reported the post. Noah's art evolved from dark sketches of division to brighter pieces showing genuine connection. His art teacher submitted his portfolio to a youth exhibition. The piece that won showed 6 kids at a kitchen table, no invisible walls between them. He titled it After the Performance. Jake and I developed an actual friendship. We played video games together without keeping score of who won more. He taught me coding. I helped him with history essays. The competition Susan had fostered between us dissolved into mutual support. Mia's dance recitals became family events by choice. We showed up because we wanted to support her, not because Susan demanded it. She performed better without her mother's critical eye in the audience. Her instructor noted her increased confidence and natural expression. Dad started therapy himself, individual sessions to process his role in enabling Susan's fantasy. He came home from appointments exhausted but clearer. He apologized to each of us individually, not for bringing Susan into our lives, but for not seeing what it cost us. The house felt bigger without Susan's oppressive presence. Rooms we'd avoided became communal spaces. The basement, Jake claimed, became a hangout spot for all of us. We set up old gaming systems and had tournaments that ended in laughter instead of silent scorekeeping. Susan's attempts to regain control grew more desperate. She threatened legal action for custody of her kids. Her lawyer dropped her when Jake, Mia, and Ethan testified about their desire to stay with Dad. The judge ordered supervised visits that Susan rarely attended, claiming we'd poisoned her children against her. School events became less stressful without Susan's documentation demands. We attended each other's presentations, games, and concerts because we wanted to. Parents noticed the change in dynamics. Several mentioned how much more natural we seemed together. The mixing bowl returned unexpectedly. Susan left it on the porch one night with a note claiming she didn't need our tainted belongings. I found it the next morning, carefully wrapped in the same newspaper I'd used. We used it that weekend to make cookies, all 6 kids crowding the kitchen. We used both moms' recipes, creating something new. Dad learned to see us as individuals instead of Susan's blended unit. He noticed Emma's music preferences, Noah's art subjects, my soccer statistics. He asked Jake about coding, Mia about dance, Ethan about his dinosaur phase. Conversations happened naturally instead of through Susan's forced family meetings. The final therapy session before Susan officially moved out revealed the depth of our transformation. 6 kids who'd spent years avoiding each other now chose to sit together. We spoke about boundaries, respect, and the difference between forced family and chosen connection. The therapist noted our progress with visible amazement. Susan's last manipulation attempt came through Ethan. She sent him gifts with notes about missing her baby, trying to guilt him into visiting. He brought the packages to family meetings, where we discussed them openly. His decision to donate the gifts to charity came from him, not us. Susan's power over her children had evaporated completely. The new normal settled gradually. Homework happened at the kitchen table with whoever needed help. Dinner was sometimes all 8 of us, sometimes just a few. We learned each other's actual preferences instead of Susan's assigned roles. Jake liked horror movies. Mia preferred mysteries. Ethan loved documentaries about space. 6 months after Susan left, I helped Dad take down the color-coded calendar. Behind it, we found Emma's height marks from when she was little before Susan arrived. Dad traced them with his finger, remembering. We spent the afternoon adding new marks for all 6 kids, not because anyone made us, but because we wanted to document our real growth together. The Discord server evolved into a group chat filled with mundane updates and inside jokes. No more escape strategies or survival tactics. Just 6 kids who'd found real siblinghood in the wreckage of someone else's fantasy. We still called it surviving together, but now it meant something different. We weren't surviving Susan anymore. We were just surviving life together, the way families do. Thanks for reading this story with me. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.